Right. So this third world America concept, I mean, in my eyes, I mean, we're headed down a path if we do not change this conversation and if we don't get a hold of our political and policy apparatus to ensure that people are made whole and that people could actually afford to survive and thrive in this nation, that we will be heading backwards. And how does a minimum wage play into that?
Well, if you go back, and I'm going to confess to having not noticed this until literally a few weeks ago, if you go back to the early post-war era, the period from the end of World War II till the mid-'70s, the minimum wage kept up not just with inflation, but with productivity growth. And that clearly wasn't an accident. There was an idea, look, we want to make sure everyone shares in the gains of economic growth. Now, since the late 60s, the minimum wage hasn't even kept up with inflation. Mm-hmm. And the legislation President Obama proposed raising the minimum wage to $9 an hour. I mean, that's a great thing. I mean, we're talking about a pay increase of over $3,000 for lowest paid workers in the country. Hard to say that's a bad thing. But that doesn't even get us back to where we were in the late 60s, where we were, at this point 45 years ago. Whereas if the minimum wage had kept pace with productivity, in other words, that workers up and down the income ladder share in the gains of economic growth, the minimum wage today would be about $16.50 an hour. Really kind of an incredible thing to think about. That's more than 40% of all men get and more than 50% of all women get. We'd be in a very, very different country if that were the case.
We've lost a lot of ground. I recently went to a book signing for a friend of mine who wrote a book called Behind the Kitchen Door, and it's about the minimum wage, and many people don't know this, for restaurant workers, which is actually lower than the national minimum wage, and it's been stagnant for decades as well. And so, they're now pushing to actually peg the minimum wage for restaurant workers to the national minimum wage. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, no, this is an incredible thing. Again, it's one of these things that very few people, even a lot of people in policy debates, are unaware of, that there's a separate minimum wage for tipped employees. And I forget when that last has been increased. I think it dates back from the mid-'80s. It's something like $3.50 an hour. I couldn't even tell you exactly what it is.
It's lower than that.
Lower than that,
yeah.
Okay. The presumption is that you're going to get that made up with your tips. And obviously, if you're working in an expensive restaurant and, people order big meals and whatever, that may be true. But for a lot of people that are working at, coffee shops, no, they're not making it up. And what that means is that you have a lot of people working in the restaurant sector that are getting considerably less than the minimum wage, which, it's really an incredible thing because $7.25 an hour is not exactly living high on the hog.
Well, at the book signing, they had people, restaurant workers, who testify that when they get their pay stubs, it actually says this is not a payment, and it's actually negative because the taxes actually wipe away their base minimum wage. And they're just in dire straits, forcing them to do all kinds of things. So it's a terrible thing when people actually work in this country and they can't make it.
Yeah, and it's kind of striking. You go back and the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. It wasn't obviously we weren't a communist country. I mean it was very much a capitalist country. Companies were making big profits, but yet there was a consensus. You had Republicans that supported this too. That you didn't get a big difference. That you got Eisenhower in the White House and suddenly said, "Oh, we're never going to raise the minimum wage again." This is across the political spectrum. This idea that everyone should share in the gains of prosperity. And that idea has just disappeared, and we're getting this notion that somehow, if we're paying our workers more than we're paying them in, the poorest country in Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, wherever it might be, that somehow that we can't do that, which, just an incredible story.